He mysteriously disappeared from the website, but he was on the board of directors. So here you have, and by the way, he sold about $3.4 million worth of Silicon Valley stock on February 28th. So why is he selling the stock 10 days before the bank goes under and gets taken over by the government? Now, I don't have enough facts to say that's insider trading, but it kind of walks and talks like it. Now, he said in his own defense that, well, this was part of a pre-agreed plan. If you're an insider and you worry about insider trading, you can come up with a plan and run it by the SEC and say, okay, I'm going to sell 5% of my holdings every month. Like every month, like clockwork, I'm going to sell 5%. So don't accuse me of insider trading because this is a pre-established plan. He had one, and that sale was according to that. But who's to say that the plan itself wasn't a front for the insider trading? I'll leave that to the courts and the SEC. But personally, I'm not, and I am a lawyer, I'm not persuaded that just because you have a plan, you do have to inquire as to whether the plan itself was part of an insider trading plan, knowing what we just talked about, knowing that the bonds were 20% underwater, knowing that billions of dollars of losses were waiting to come to the surface. You should have known that a year ago. That it didn't hit till last week, but you should have known that a year ago. So file the plan and dump your stock, under legal cover, so to speak. So that's just some of the kind of, in my view, corruption. I won't say criminality, but corruption that was going on. But if you said, what's the bottom line? Oh, sorry, going back to the other part. Yeah, there would have been lines at banks, probably. I think that's likely. I got, I don't know, old friends, family members are calling me on, DM or email or text or whatever. Hey, Jim, I got 30 grand in the local S&L. Should I pull it out? And I said, no, sit tight. It's fine. But yeah, I think that would have happened. Certainly the failure of a large number of tech startups in Silicon Valley and elsewhere, I think that would have happened now, but we don't know. I mean, is it possible that they could have turned to their venture capital backers to say, hey, my money's tied up for maybe a year in this, receivership certificate. And they would have said, okay, well, we like what you're doing and your tech's good. Here's another $2 million to tide you over. We'll make it a bridge loan or charge you a high interest rate. Who's to say that people creatively and adaptively and in their own financial interest wouldn't have found a way to work through this? Well, we'll never know because the government just didn't want to, find out, and they took over. And but the biggest crybabies over the weekend were the billionaires. It was Mark Cuban, Bill Ackman, and others. Kevin O'Leary may not be a billionaire, but he's pretty wealthy. These were the guys screaming and crying, oh, you got to bail this out. You didn't hear it from everyday people. They seem to be happy with their own bank. So I question that scenario could have happened, and that's certainly why the government acted. But I question whether there wouldn't have been, some benefit of letting the chips fall where they will. Hey, you like this company? We'll put up some more money because sorry, they got no liquid asset, and that's their blunder. And maybe risk managers around the country would have sat up and said, well, I need to do a better job. There are futures, there are options, there are ways to kind of sell your portfolio on stages and take the loss a little bit at a time. There are ways to manage around that, but everyone was just depending on the Fed because after all, the Fed has bailed out every crisis since 1994 and probably earlier. But the last point, yeah, the banking system, whatever the ownership structure, is de facto nationalized because when you guarantee something, and the Fed has guaranteed all the portfolios and all the deposits, the FDIC has guaranteed all the deposits, and the Fed has guaranteed against portfolio losses because they said they'll take the bonds and give you 100 cents on the dollar. There's always a price to pay. You don't get that kind of bailout without the government coming up with new regulations. The government's ability to say, oh, by the way, we'd like to see you make more loans to climate change. We'd like to see you make more contributions to Democratic, political action committees. We'd like to see you, get into this whole, equity diversity thing. You're not doing enough in that area. You've got leverage now because you can always kick one of these banks out of the club, and they are dependent on you. The government is their oxygen supply. So I think it's a very, not just a good question, but a really, smart observation that in effect we've nationalized our banking system. We did. Yeah, and just on the Ackman thing, I would bet money that statement you read, and yeah, I saw that in the press. That's what he said. Was written by a lawyer because I happen to. For better or worse, I am a lawyer, so I know all the lawyers' tricks. So as soon as I hear the key words, the word direct. I don't have any direct investments. Okay, well, what about your indirect investments? So that's the first thing.
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information. And it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now, let's continue.
He says, yeah, I have some of those. Doesn't say how much. Doesn't say where they are. And then even that is limited to a portfolio of private equity investments. But is he in, some of the big VCs? Is he in Centerbridge? Is he in Kleiner Perkins? Is he in other funds, et cetera? I don't know. Right. But that's the point. It was a carefully worded, a lot of wordsmithing going on. And I don't question the truthfulness of it. I'll say, oh, that's a true statement. I don't question that. But there's a lot of wiggle room between direct and indirect and yeah, but not how much, et cetera, without, and then list a category, but not say what other categories might be in there. There's just a lot of wiggle room in that. It's, for 8 billion, 3 billion, 2 billion, I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of room for a haircut there. Even these very successful companies, they don't have $2 billion payrolls. It might be, 100, it might be 10 million or something. I don't know. You do the math on that. But the point is they could have taken a substantial haircut. It didn't have to be all or none. It didn't have to be zero or full. Like, how about half? We're gonna cut all the deposits by half and give your seat and like guarantee the rest. That's still a bailout, but at least again, some of these, there were a lot of startups, and those startups might have failed over the course of the next couple of weeks. I would acknowledge that. They have 20 employees. I'm saying I don't care about 20 people. I do, but I'm saying that's not going to shake the world. And a lot of this money, you're right about the number. I think the number I saw was 97%, but yeah, 95, 97%, overwhelmingly uninsured deposits. Pardon me. And why weren't those deposits spread around among 10 banks? That's just good risk management. Why didn't the corporate treasurers, or how do we know they did or didn't? Why didn't the corporate treasurers buy, you can buy credit default swap insurance on banks. You can buy credit default swap insurance on, any kind of market volatility. Why didn't they have insurance? Why didn't they have swaps? Why didn't they have futures? Why didn't they have options? Why didn't they spread the money around? Why didn't they diversify? This is not rocket science. I mean, I hate to use a cliche, but this is risk management 101. They didn't do any of that. They were completely concentrated in one bank, which itself had no risk management. So, or no competent risk management. So my sympathy is very limited. And by the way, if it's a humanitarian issue, and yeah, that's the way a lot of people are framing it, you're right. What about the homeless? What about the mentally ill? What about 100,000 Americans dying of fentanyl? What are we doing about the border? What are we doing about Chinese and Mexican collaboration in manufacturing fentanyl and making it candy colored so kids will get addicted or kill themselves? And by the way, the Chinese, I spend a lot of time in China and I do a lot of work there. The Chinese, people always say they think in centuries and millennia, and they do. This is their revenge for the Opium Wars. I mean, what happened in the 1840s? Well, the UK was running a trade deficit with China because the Chinese didn't want anything that the UK was selling. The English and their colonies and possessions, they wanted silks, they wanted tea, they wanted natural resources, they wanted ceramics, they wanted all kinds of things from China. They were buying them, and China didn't really want anything from the UK. And in those days, it was a mercantilist system where you had to settle up in gold or silver. Chinese had a kind of particular appetite for silver. So there was a huge drain of silver from the UK to China to pay for the net trade deficit that the UK was running. But Whitehall was like, nah, that's not good enough because we want the gold and silver ourselves. So they had a task force and said, what can we sell the Chinese? Well, they'll have to pay for it and they'll balance out the trade. The answer was opium, because the British had northern India and Afghanistan. And so they said, the Chinese will sell you some opium. And they said, you crazy? We don't want that. Even the decadent Qing dynasty was smarter than that. And the British said, too bad. They sent the Royal Navy into Hong Kong and they blasted the port open with cannon fire and took over and forced the Chinese to buy the opium. And then not the entire, but a large segment of the population got addicted. I mean, you've seen people with pipes and opium dens. They look emaciated, and they are. But we got the Chinese sorry, this is the British. The Americans had a hand in it, the Delanos and others, but got the Chinese hooked on opium so they could solve a balance of trade problem. And the Chinese never forgot it, because they went from the Opium Wars to the Boxer Rebellion. There was a Taiping Heavenly Path Rebellion, took over half of China, and then the unequal treaties, and then the Japanese invasion, and the Civil War, other period, the warlords in the 1920s. So China went through 120 years of chaos and turmoil until finally Mao Zedong took over. But they never forgot about the Opium War. So now they're turning that around on us. They're selling us fentanyl. Hey, let's get the Americans addicted. Let's kill the Americans. And they are. And Mexico's working hand in glove with them. So if you're concerned about Roku having $1 billion or so deposit at Silicon Valley Bank as humanitarian, I would say, okay, there's a long list of humanitarian causes I would put in front of that.